Yeah, Peter, you've been talking to a lot of folks. I wonder, you tell me, I mean, do they still look at President Trump and say, yeah, he should have won in 2020, that election was rigged? They still buy that argument? I mean, he says the same thing over and over and over again. It's been 11 years now. He talked about rigged elections back in 2016 because he thought he was going to lose. Do you hear anyone start to roll, or have you seen anyone start to roll their eyes at that?
The only time you hear it, Katie, is the stuff that all of us see on television or in congressional hearings or on social media when some Trump loyalist or diehard or sycophant brings it up because they want to impress President Trump, who's watching it on television, and he might see it. But if you talk to any Republican, even MAGA Republicans in Congress or in state houses around the country, no one is really still talking about that. So I agree with Ashley. This doesn't really have the same kind of resonance that it used to. Look, Donald Trump's poll numbers with Republican voters are still pretty strong. I mean, his approval rating is probably, like in the 80s right now with Republican voters. It's higher among MAGA identifying voters, obviously. But if you look at things like the Iran war, there is some slippage there. The real issue, though, isn't just the base. It's the coalition that got him elected. And I talked to you about this last time I was on the show, Katie, I think. It's the independent voters, it's the suburban dads, it's the Latino voters, and it's the young men, in addition to the MAGA base that got him elected in 2024. And if you subtract the MAGA base, all of those other slices of the electorate are now against him. He's underwater in terms of his approval rating on the economy, on foreign policy, even on immigration. They've just flocked away from him. And so he is just not as powerful. These words don't land in the same way across a broad swath of voters in the way that they
Peter,
might.
You have some new polling specifically on the Iran war. Can you walk us through it?
Yeah, at Puck, we did a poll with Echelon Insights last week, our polling partner. I kind of had them scratched a little bit below the surface. We know that the war is unpopular with voters, but I think we all saw when this war started, and you heard Trump say one thing about nuclear weapons and Marco Rubio say another thing about Israel, and other officials talk about regime change. The administration has really failed to communicate why they're in this war and what the end game is. And so 56% of voters in our poll say that Trump hasn't communicated well at all. 54% say they don't trust Trump to end the war in a way that makes the U.S. feel safer. 67% of voters disapprove of the fight that he had with Pope Leo over war and peace. I mean, voters hate that. These are clear majorities of American voters. What's really interesting, Katie, though, to me, if you go back to the Iraq war, whether people disagreed with it or not, about 90% of people in this country, according to Gallup, agreed that the war was about finding weapons of mass destruction, okay, whether they were there or not. Today, Echelon found no one agrees what this war is about. The Trump administration has settled on stopping Iran from developing nuclear weapons. That's their message now. But only 22% of voters say that's why we're at war. Another 20% say it's about getting oil. 6% say it's about distracting from domestic issues. 13% say it's a show of power by Trump. And so the fact that voters have no idea what's going on in this war just shows how much the White House has failed to communicate what a messaging and political failure this is for them.
Matthew, does that surprise you? I mean, the White House will say, what are you talking about? We've been out there every day saying Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, that Iran posed a threat to not just the United States, but the entire world. And Donald Trump was the only one with the guts to do anything about it.
Yeah, Katie. I mean, listen, Peter's polling is incredibly revealing, but probably not shocking. President Trump took the military to war, but certainly did not take the American public to war. And the messaging, as stated, has been disjointed at best, maybe even divorced from reality, certainly some of the economic and even political realities. In the first administration, I was a part of that. We prided ourselves on peace and prosperity. Now we have war and unaffordability. The messaging is just all over the place, so much so that this is, some of the first time where I've heard people I know in the base who are complaining about the president's tweets. And this is a guy that's been popping off on social media for well over a decade. But this war and how he is conducted over Truth Social is the first time, again, from the Pope to destroying a civilization, that members of his own base are showing alarm there. So again, Peter's polling number, incredibly insightful, incredibly interesting, but probably not shocking given everything.
Yeah, I mean, actually, on that subject, on the president's mental acuity, we'll put it that way, he called himself today an extraordinarily, what was the language? An extraordinarily brilliant person, very stable genius vibes to it. But he is all over the place. He's threatening to end a civilization. He's tweeting or posting, all hours of the night. He's falling asleep in these cabinet meetings. He's always going on tangents, but these tangents seem especially weird. Sharpie pen stories that the head of Sharpie says never happened. There's that Wall Street Journal reporting from our friend Josh Dawsey that says that aides are keeping him out of kept him out of a sensitive strategy session about how to get those 2 airmen out of Iraq. I mean, I'm still shocked by that. They had to keep the president out of those meetings because he was too erratic and he wouldn't be helpful in paraphrasing. What are you hearing from your sources at the White House? I know this has been a different administration. It hasn't leaked as much. But it seems like they're starting to leak and they're starting to raise some concerns.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, on the one hand, a lot of this is not so dissimilar from the first term. Josh's reporting is fantastic. That was a great Wall Street Journal story. But it sort of harkens back to things we knew in the first term of aides stealing pieces of paper off of his desk so he couldn't sign certain policies, right? There's always been that level of management, although frankly, we've seen a lot less of that and a lot less of those guardrails this term. But I think the sort of all-overness you're describing, Katie, is particularly acute on something like the Iran war, which, as Peter was noting, really needs to be sold to the American public in a clear, linear messaging way. And going back to the very beginning of these strikes, I was struck by, even for Trump, watching him speak, sometimes in the same news conference, but sometimes in the same sentence in the same news conference, he would say, this war is already over. It's also just begun. Right? Like the idea that Americans have no idea why we are at war with Iran is because Donald Trump, in these phone calls he takes from reporters daily, including we are guilty of this sometimes at The Atlantic, and what he says in news conferences. I mean, there's no way you could parse any clear message from that. And his aides are aware of that.
Let me play some Florida voters on what I think is probably the baseline of this all. I mean, people aren't happy about Iran, yes, but if the economy was going really well and people were feeling good about their wallets, they might not be so upset. Let me play some Florida voters, though, talking about Donald Trump and his words, his claims about this economy.
I mean, I disagree with him. I think he's gaslighting us or delusional. I don't know what it is, but yeah, that's not the case.
It's not the greatest economy in the history of our country. It's not blowing out of the water.
Struggling. People are struggling.
That's what he does, just talking. I think he does it for like laughs and giggles or something.
I think it's a dog and pony show. And they're going to tell us anything to distract us from what's actually happening. And we need to think for ourselves and not listen to any of that. Make your own wise decisions.
Matthew, I mean, I'm going to steal something from some notes we got from you. Maybe they just need to hear more about the ballroom, and that's going to make them feel good.
Yeah, listen, when the economy is going well, the American public have a very high tolerance for the nonsense. But when it's not going well, the nonsense compounds. And like you just said, boy, Peter, would love to see if there's polling on the arch and the ballroom, because the president seems to continue to be laser focused on this, much more so than any ideas for the American public. The White House must know what they're doing, right? A bipartisan, maybe Americans are concerned about the economy, anxious about the war, but just are swooning for this new redecoration from the interior decorator in chief. I kid, kinda. Because we truly do not have an economic message. The one priority, we are here to fix the economy. We've done everything but it. Doging, Elon probably helped pass Virginia redistricting more than anybody. Liberation Day, the chaos. I would think the first term was a soap opera. This has been a lot of shock treatment. And again, just a jettison of the economy, which is incredibly frustrating and disrespectful to the voter.